Could we reduce our federal deficit from $2.5 trillion to $1 trillion over the next 4 years? Presidents have been committing to reducing spending and removing waste from our budget for many years, but there hasn't been a balanced budget since Bill Clinton was in office 30 years ago. Has anyone tried since? Most recently, Barack Obama promised to streamline the federal bureaucracy back during his first year in office. We are going to go through the federal budget page by page, line by line. That's a quote from Barack Obama from 2009. And what was the result of their efforts? Actually, Obama increased taxes on working Americans like you and me, increased total government spending annually by 13%, and ultimately increased the deficit by the end of his 8 years in office. And remember that presidents set the budget for the next year after they leave office. Obama increased the deficit 32% from what he inherited and handed Trump a deficit of $665 billion. Obama and his team faced major challenges like the 2009 financial crisis, referred to as the Great Recession, and the housing market crash of 2011. And if you compare the deficit the year he entered in 2009 to the year he left in 2016, it could appear that the outcome was that Obama's White House were actually good stewards of our tax dollars, and that he didn't leave us any worse off. But the fact is that he increased annual government spending, increased taxes, partnered with George W. Bush to give our banks money in a bailout while citizens lost their homes. Obama ended up burdening Trump with a deficit increase of 32% from $458 billion, the budget that he inherited from George W. Bush, to $665 billion in 2017. And in all that time, with all the meddling in the market with the 2009 stimulus and managing Bush's TARP bank bailout, which actually appears to have been managed somewhat well by his White House in many respects, Obama never reformed government agencies or completed his line-by-line review. So what about Trump? Could we see actual deficit reduction by the end of his 4-year term? I guess we'd have to count on there not being any recession or housing crash, pandemic or debt spiral or gas shortage or any further record-breaking inflation. If the U.S. citizenry can avoid all of that, and if somehow this White House can avoid the danger that our country has been heading towards, maybe Trump could pull it off. This country was operating at around $1 trillion deficit in 2019. This is by no means an acceptable place to be, but it's a far cry from the current projection of $2.5 trillion for 2025, the budget that Trump inherited from Biden. Fixing things always takes much more effort than breaking them. So I think a very ambitious yet attainable goal would be to target a $1 trillion deficit by 2028, and for Trump to hand the next president a deficit of something like $950 billion in 2029. This would basically take us back to where Trump left off before COVID. This is by no means going to get us to a balanced budget in 4 years, but it's a good start. And it will be a budget that is sustainable because Trump's White House will have done what Bush and Obama never did: a line-by-line review to make sure Americans' tax dollars are spent on what matters to taxpayers. What do you think? Is that a good enough goal? Can Trump do it? How many years and what kind of real reform is necessary to finally balance the budget for the first time in 30 years?